Hello. So, yesterday I said I was going to upload a video. Sorry about the noise in the background if you can hear my neighbor's dog barking. It's a little chihuahua, and he is not convinced that he should not be in the house terrorizing everybody trying to, get their food. He's the cutest thing, but sometimes he is quite noisy. So please forgive the noise. But yesterday I said I was going to upload a reading of one of my favorite stories from childhood when I was younger, and I found it, and the name of it is Where the Wild Things Are. When I was younger, for some reason, I could not remember R, and so I would always call the book Where the Wild Things Grow, which is kind of interesting conceptually because I think my mind was taking the story as, being in isolation and separated and treated as a wild thing, and even called a wild thing to cover up what was going on in my life. That even in the midst of all of that, I grew a very thick skin, and one of the aspects of that experience is I just developed a lack of care about what people think of me or say about me. It doesn't matter. It's just sound. It's just words, and it's just their thought. It doesn't mean that it's what I believe about myself, what I know to be true, or what God says about me or thinks about me. And so it has no power over me in that way. But back to the main point, the reason I love the book is because in this story, the main character, Max, gets in trouble and gets sent to bed because he is not, acting in accordance with what he's supposed to. And even in that wild imagination fantasy world where he is in his room and he's in trouble or on discipline, however you want to term it, and his mind is able to configure this imaginatory world, he still at the very end of the story comes back to the reality of life, and it's not as bad as what he had thought, because he's able to eat dinner and it's still hot. So here we go. That the night Max wore his wolf suit and made mischief of one kind and another, his mother called him Wild Thing, and Max said, "I'll eat you up." So he was sent to bed without eating anything. That very night in Max's room, a forest grew and grew and grew until his ceiling hung with vines and the walls became the world all around. And an ocean tumbled by with a private boat for Max, and he sailed off through the night and day. And in and out of weeks and almost over a year to where the wild things are. And when he came to the place where the wild things are, they roared their terrible roars and gnashed their terrible teeth and rolled their terrible eyes and showed their terrible claws, till Max said, "Be still," and tamed them with the magic trick of staring into all of their yellow eyes without blinking once. And they were frightened and called him the most wild thing of all, and made him king of all wild things. "And now," cried Max, "let the wild rumpus start." And they danced, and they swung from trees. And then he rode on their backs as the king. Now stop, Max said, and sent the wild things off to bed without their supper. And Max, the king of all the wild things, was lonely and wanted to be where someone loved him best of all. Then all around, from far away, across the world, he smelled good things to eat. So he gave up being king of where the wild things are. But the wild things cried, "Oh, please don't go. We'll eat you up. We love you so." And Max said no. The wild things roared their terrible roars and gnashed their terrible teeth and rolled their terrible eyes and showed their terrible claws. But Max stepped into his private boat and waved goodbye and sailed back over a year and in and out of weeks and through a day and into the night of his very own room, where he found his supper waiting for him. And it was still hot. It's a really short story, but when I was a kid, I loved it because it just depicted, the wild imagination of a child learning how to navigate life, how to navigate, rules and expected ways of behaving. And I loved it as a kid because I thought it was so crazy for the writer to put in there that Max was in control. Because in my childhood, I was never in control of anything that happened to me. I was always at the mercy of very demonic energy that wanted to see me just wiped off of the planet, to have no capacity to breathe or think for myself, didn't want anyone to show mercy to me, show love to me. And it wasn't just one person, it was my entire family. And it was like I was offered as a child as a scapegoat for everything so that the family could benefit from what they did to me in secret, and then they expected me to not speak of it and would treat me as if I was asking for it to happen even more to me by speaking of it, by saying, hey, this is what's happening to me, this is wrong, I do not like this, I want it to stop. And so as a very, very young child, I was never going to be the one who was going to be quiet, who was going to be silent about it. And when my family realized that and recognized that, the abuse only intensified. It didn't get better. It got worse. And the town that I grew up in was so corrupt on the police department that you could not trust police. You could not trust them to do their jobs, to investigate child abuse claims, because most likely they were a part of it, And the head of the narcotics squad in the town that I grew up in was part of the drugs that were pumped out into the town that I grew up in. And so it was a very small town with very corrupt policies and departments and police, and nobody did their job. And the state of California as a whole is a haven for predators and pedophiles. And they don't treat sex crimes against children with a high degree of responsibility or honesty. And so it's no wonder, that's also where I think one of the headquarters for Disney is. It's no wonder. because the whole atmosphere of the state is to destroy the innocence of childhood. And they do that through the different measures that they put into place and the way that they handle crimes against children and crimes against women. And for anybody who has never been there to say that, oh, no, state couldn't possibly go to that length. It does. California does. There's just the lack of actual empathy and care for children, especially for disadvantaged children, which are children in the court systems, children in foster care. And it's disheartening. But if this video finds you and you're listening, I want you to know that it is possible to overcome all of those hurdles. It is also possible to heal from them and move on with your life in such a way that those scars do not dictate how you move and operate in your world. And they just become moments where you were reminded and shown how strong you are, that you choose to heal, that you choose to overcome, and that you will forever make that choice, regardless of what it looks like, regardless of what it feels like, even if everyone around you completely rejects you. If you choose to heal, none of that is going to matter, because the only thing that matters is how you show up for yourself in the midst of your own life. And that is what will bring you home to yourself, to where you don't need the validation and all of the outward appearances of having made it, to be home within yourself and be comfortable with your life. So if this has helped you, I hope it has, then hit the like button. I invite you to. You don't have to. And I will see you on the next video.